an electrocutioner. I prefer this word to executioner. I think that words make a difference.
Fast asleep.
Welcome to Fast Asleep with Gina Marie, where you can regularly tuck in for a classic short story from an award-winning author. Hi, everybody. I'm Gina. And do you know, it takes a curious and thoughtful mind. It takes someone with imagination and sensitivity to truly appreciate these classic stories. So, I'm glad you found us. That in itself is not easy to do. If this episode is your very first, you chose a good one. Critics called today's author the master craftsman of the psychological thriller. He is Stanley Ellin. If you don't know Stanley Ellin, it is now time to know him. Longtime listeners, I know you know about this fabulous author. So, anytime, guys, just scroll back for his most well-known short story, Specialty of the House. And what a specialty. And that's not the only Stanley Ellin you'll find on Fast Asleep. Check them all out. He wrote 15 novels and dozens of short stories, with 4 becoming major motion pictures and others television episodes. Critics found nothing but praise for Mr. Stanley Ellin. New York Times critics Anthony Boucher and Alan J. Hubin had lots of words for him, calling him the American master and coining that master craftsman phrase as well. And that had to be very, very satisfying for a boy raised in Brooklyn, New York, who often suffered from some awful ailment or another throughout his childhood. Stanley loved to read and was very bright. In fact, he graduated from Brooklyn College when he was just 19 years old. He married fellow student Jean Michael. And then his variety of jobs began. He was a magazine salesman, a boilermaker's assistant, a steel worker, a shipyard worker — I guess the ailments were gone by then — a dairy farmer, a junior college teacher, and of course, now it's 1944, he was a member of the U.S. Army. When he returned from World War II, he began his most important and most lucrative job, that of being a writer. His very first short story, the one I just mentioned, Specialty of the House, launched Stanley Ellin to well-known status, just like that. Yeah, he was very well recognized for his work, and also he is still the most nominated writer for the Edgar Allan Poe Award, and he's won that award on at least 3 occasions. He also has served as president of the Mystery Writers of America. He passed in 1986 from a heart attack. He was 69 years old. There is something about that Brooklyn upbringing. It made him one of Fast Asleep's most beloved writers. And with good reason. Prepare yourself. Published in 1964. Tuck in, everybody, for Stanley Ellin's The Question. I am an electrocutioner. I prefer this word to executioner. I think that words make a difference. When I was a boy, people who buried the dead were undertakers. And then, somewhere along the way, they became morticians and are better off for it. So, as I said, I am an electrocutioner, which is the proper professional word used in my state, where the electric chair is the means of execution. I am the man you cannot see. I am the man in the next room who throws the switch. Not that this is my full-time job. It's actually a sideline, as it is for most of us who perform executions. My real business is running an electrical supply and repair shop, just as my father did before me. When he died, I not only inherited the shop, but also the position of state executioner. By that time, we established a tradition then, my father and I, that had started with my grandfather. He had built the shop up from nothing and was already running the business profitably even before the turn of the century, when electricity was a comparatively new thing. My grandfather also has the distinction of being the first man to successfully perform an electrocution for the state. Now, I say the first successful execution with good reason. There was one that was performed prior to my grandfather's, but it was badly mishandled by the engineer who designed the chair for one of our state prisons. My grandfather, who was an assistant at the time, told my father that on that day, everything that could go wrong did go wrong. To begin with, the current wasn't strong enough. That initial shock of electricity, which is supposed to scramble the brain, didn't have enough power behind it to knock the convict out. The man at the switch froze in terror when the prisoner started screaming. Apparently, the man was still conscious and continued to scream until his tongue burnt to a crisp between his scorched teeth. So, when the next time came to use the chair, my grandfather offered to do the job himself. He rewired the apparatus, added some clamps, and handled the switch himself. The electrocution went so smoothly that he was officially offered the job of executioner the same day. My father followed in his footsteps, and I followed in my father's, which is how traditions are made. But I am afraid that this one ends with me. Oh, I have a son, and what I said to him and what he said to me is the crux of the matter. He asked me a question, and in my opinion, it's the kind of question that is at the heart of most of the world's troubles today. There are some sleeping dogs that should be left to lie. There are some questions that should not be asked. Now, to understand all this, I think you have to understand a little bit about me. I'm 60, just beginning to look my age. just a little overweight, and I suffer sometimes with arthritis when the weather's damp. I'm a good citizen. I complain about my taxes, but pay them on time. I vote for the correct party. I go to church on Sunday. My wife sings in the church choir. And I run my business well enough to make a decent living from it. I've been married 35 years and have never looked at another woman. Well, maybe looked, but no more than that. I have a daughter who is married to a good lawyer in town and a tiny granddaughter who is the prettiest, happiest baby in all the wide world. Oh, my wife and I spoil her every chance we get, but that's what grandparents are made for. Let Mom and Dad attend to business. Grandparents, we're there just for the fun stuff. It's a good life. And beyond all of it, I have a son who asks questions, the kinds of questions that should not be asked. Asking too many questions is not worth it. Believe me, if you spend too much time asking why this and why that about everything, nothing will ever get done. Let a generation of questioners go by, and you'll have people who are too afraid to make any difficult decisions. We'll all end up like a bunch of monkeys just sitting around scratching our heads. Ours can be a harsh world, and unpleasant choices sometimes have to be made. Let me give you an example. Around the time I first started going to school, my father gave me a dog, a shepherd pup that I called Rex. He started out as a great pup, but in a few years, Rex suddenly became unfriendly, the way dogs sometimes do. A year later, he became downright vicious. One day, he bit my mother when she reached down to pick up his food dish. And that evening, I saw my father leaving the house with his hunting rifle tucked under his arm and Rex on a leash. It was not the hunting season. I knew what was going to happen to Rex, and I knew why, but I had to be stupid and ask questions. I will admit I was upset that day, and I suppose it was forgivable for a boy to ask what a man would be smart enough not to ask. "Where are you taking Rex?" I asked my father. "What are you going to do with him?" "I'm taking Rex out of town," my father said in a calm, serious voice, "out to the woods. I'm going to shoot him." "But why?" I asked. I had started to cry. I hadn't wanted to, but the tears came all the same. My father looked at me and did not frown or get angry or tell me to stop crying. But he did let me see by the look on his face that there could be only one answer to such a question. "Because it has to be done," he said. I never forgot that lesson. It was hard, very hard, for a while. For a long time, I hated my father. But as I grew up, I began to see how right he was. We both knew that the dog had to be put down before someone got really hurt. Beyond that, all questions would lead nowhere. Why had my dog become vicious? Why not someone else's dog? Why did God even put a dog on the earth just to become vicious and get killed in that way? You could ask such questions until the end of time, and all the while you would still have a vicious dog on your hands. My father knew his business, and he knew that life was about tough decisions. Not that he ever talked about his line of work with anyone. My mother and I both knew, but we never talked about it. And certainly, we never told our friends and neighbors. What kind of life would my father have had if people knew he was a state executioner? He never made a show of his sideline. Maybe 3 or 4 times a year, my father would put on his best suit, pack up a few electrical tools, and go away for a couple of days. If anyone nosy asked where he was going, he would simply say he had a job to do out of town. He was not a man anyone would think of as a gambler or drinker or philanderer. So no one really gave it a second thought. Perhaps it was in this I erred. I never told my son what I did on the side when he was growing up. Not until he was in his 20s and a man himself did I bring up that particular topic. By then, he was practically a full business partner, so I decided to let him in on all the aspects of our work. How did he react? Stay with me. I'll be right back. I never told my son what I did on the side when he was growing up. Not until he was in his 20s and a man himself did I bring up that particular topic. By then he was practically a full business partner, so I decided to let him in on all the aspects of our work. How did he react? He was appalled. An electrocutioner. You, an electrocutioner. Well, now, I said, feeling a little ruffled at his reaction. There's no disgrace in it. And since it needs to be done and somebody's got to do it, why not keep it in the family? If you must know, this position has been handed down 3 generations already. What is wrong with a good, sound tradition? If people believed in tradition, we wouldn't have half the troubles we do today. This would have been more than enough to convince me, but what I hadn't taken into account was how different my son was from me. Much as I wanted him to be like me, he was a man in his own right, with a mind of his own, and I knew he hadn't settled into his responsibilities like I thought he would. I had kept closing my eyes to that. I had seen him the way I wanted to see him, and not the way he was. When he couldn't decide what he wanted out of college, I said to myself, well, that's okay, not everyone is made for college. When he went out with girl after another without settling down to marry any of them, I thought, well, he's young and eventually he'll settle down with the right woman. When he spent more time having fun with his friends than at the shop with me, I never made a fuss about it. It seems to me that these days people put more of a priority on having fun than they did in my generation, so he was just going with the crowd, and who was I to say different? The truth was that the only thing that mattered to me was being his friend. You see, all the time he was growing up, it was there in the back of my mind like the yellow glow of a single light bulb burning in a dark house, that he was the one I could someday share my secret with. He would be the one who would make the burden easier to bear. I'm not a secretive man by nature, and I needed a hope like that to keep me going. So when the time came to ask him, and he shook his head no, I was flabbergasted. It was as if someone had kicked the legs out from under me. I argued with him and pleaded with him, and he still said no. So I did the wrong thing. I lost my temper. So, you're against capital punishment? Is that it? You don't have to worry or apologize if you are. In fact, I would think better of you if that was your reason. I don't know if it is, my son said. Well, don't you think you ought to make up your mind about it? I was upset, and even though some part of me urged the upset part to back off, I ignored it and pressed on, because I'd hate to think you were like every other hypocrite around here who says, oh, it's all right to condemn a man to the electric chair.
and all wrong to pull the switch.
Yeah, but do I have to be the one to pull it? He asked. Do you?
Somebody has to do it. Somebody always has to do the dirty work for the rest of us. It's not like the Old Testament days when everybody did it for themselves. Do you know how they executed a man in those days? They laid him on the ground, tied hand and foot, and they threw rocks at him until he died. It took a long time sometimes. And they didn't invite everyone around to stand and watch. No, they passed the rocks around. You wouldn't have had much choice then, would you?
I don't know,
he said. And then, because he was as smart as they come and already knew how to turn your own words against you, he said,
after all, I'm not without sin.
You're talking like a baby, I said, getting angrier. You're without the sin of murder or any other kind of sin that would call for you to be executed. If you're going to quote the Bible, you should remember to render under Caesar the things that are Caesar's.
Well,
he said,
if that's the case, I think I'll let you do all the rendering.
I knew then, from the way he said it and the way he looked at me, that it was no use trying to argue with him. I guess the worst of it was in knowing that we had now moved apart from each other and would never, ever be really close again. Not like the way we were before. I should have had sense to let it go at that. I should have kept my mouth shut. Maybe if I'd considered the possibility that he might say no, I would have been better prepared. I will admit it now, I was off balance and much too upset to think straight. I was the one that led him to ask the one question he should not have asked. Oh, I see,
I was shouting by now.
It's the same old damn story, isn't it? Let somebody else do it, right? If you serve on a jury and convict a murderer and send him to the chair, oh, that's all right with you, isn't it? As long as you don't have to get your hands dirty. You know what? I don't think you would have had the guts anyway. I don't think you could even be next to the chair without fainting. No, you're right. The shop is where you belong. Hooking up outlets and ringing the cash register. Well, I don't need you. I can do my duties just fine without you. It hurt me to say that. I had never talked to him like that before. And the silence stretched on and on. The funny thing, though, was that when he spoke, he didn't sound angry at all, only puzzled.
Is that all it is to you?
He asked.
Duty?
Yes.
But you get paid for it, don't you?
I get paid little enough for it, yes. He kept looking at me in that strange sort of puzzled way.
Only a duty?
He asked again, never once taking his eyes off me.
But you enjoy it,
don't you? That was the question he asked. You enjoy it, don't you? Huh. You stand there looking through the little peephole in the wall at the chair. If you're like me, you have stood there 20 times looking at the chair. The door across the room opens. The guards bring somebody in, usually. He's in a daze until he sees the chair, and then he starts to struggle. Sometimes he screams, throws himself around, and tries to fight. Sometimes the guards bring in a woman, and a woman can be as hard to handle as a man. All of them scream when they begin to tighten the straps. The black hood is dropped over the head. Now your hand is on the switch. Your eyes are glued to the convict. The warden quickly signals and you pull the switch. The current hits the body like a tremendous rush of air, filling it. The body leaps out of the seat. Only the straps are holding it back. The head jerks and a curl of smoke comes from it. You release the switch, and the body flops down again. You do it again, and you do it a third time just to make sure. And whenever your hand throws that switch, you can see in your mind what the current is doing to that body and what the face under the hood must look like. Enjoy it. That was the question my son asked me. That is what he asked. As if I didn't have the same feelings deep down that we all have. Enjoy it. Oh my God. How could anyone not enjoy it? Introduction information for this episode is from Crime Reads and their article by J. Kingston Pierce entitled The Unconventional Private Eyes of Stanley Ellin, and other information in our show notes. Music today is from The Swan from Andrea Tonoli, Morning with You from the David Roy collection, Gymnopédie No. 3 from Bishara Haroni, and Coming Back from Yehezkel Roz. Don't forget to leave a comment for us right here. Or you can email us at fastasleepwithginamarie44@gmail.com. We're on Instagram, Facebook, and TikTok. Thank you for reviewing us and commenting and liking and subscribing. And thank you for listening. Keyword: enjoy. And next week, a little supernatural atmosphere from the wonderfully weird Algernon Blackwood.
good night.